Thank you for the warm introduction. Let's start by having each one of our panelists introduce themselves. Chiao-hi, do you want to start?
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Chiao-hi Hui. I'm founder and CEO of Solution Diagnostics. We are excited to empower personal healthcare through reliable, accessible, and affordable solutions because we believe that when an individual can test early and test often, they can elevate their wellness and their health in their life. And if multiple people within a community can do that, that elevates the overall wellness in a community. So we're excited to launch with a first product that will detect COVID-19, flu A, flu B, and RSV, all with one swab in 10 minutes at home. And we're excited that we'll be launching with 2 big box retailers to make sure it is accessible for everybody.
Thank you. Ian?
Hey, I'm Ian Quigley. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Leash Biosciences. And we are a machine learning drug discovery company, and we work on inflammation and oncology indications. But a key part of our sort of special sauce is that we've noticed whenever machine learning solves a really hard problem, it gets solved because a really big data set gets made to solve the problem. That's one reason why we can do protein folding very effectively now, like the thing that won the Nobel Prize a couple months ago. And so we built an automated lab to physically measure massive numbers of small molecules binding to protein targets to advance novel small molecule therapeutics.
I'm Chad Pollard with Renew Biotechnologies, CEO, co-founder, co-founded it out of BYU a few years ago, back in 2022. And we like to just talk about how we're kind of the methylation guys. So we developed a methylation platform for Oxford Nanopore Technologies and are in our growth stage, just started generating revenue last year, have a little over 30 employees, and are definitely in the trenches of scaling the company. So, yeah.
Thank you, Chad. Could I just ask by a show of hands, how many people in the room here are either entrepreneurs or startup CEOs, startup executives? Great, I think that's the majority of the people in here. So this panel, I'm hoping, will help all of you learn from experiences of others and us to learn from you as well. So let's get started here. My first question to the panel is, can you tell us a little bit about a current significant challenge you're having in your company and how you're dealing with it? So let's start at the other end. Chad, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'd say a current significant challenge we're having is so we'll call them kind of growing pains, but we officially commercialized a product in November, and we thought the product was ready to go. Now, we learned quickly that because 30 people said, hey, the product was ready to go, the customer said your product was like 80% ready to go.
That's pretty good, Chad. Actually.
Yeah, so that was probably the biggest hurdle in the last like 3-4 months, is having to quickly adapt and make sure that we were able to provide the product we believed we were providing, and we're still going through it right now. So that was a big part, and then on top of that, we had an exciting partnership that came, and it was the same thing. Partnership. Apparently, we pitched a lot better than our product was ready to go, and so being able to adapt quickly to get your product to the standard that consumers want once it's in their hand is our biggest hurdle right now. So innovating quickly.
Ian?
I can think of a couple. One that I'll probably talk about is when we started this company, almost like 2/3 of us are ex-Recursion. You guys probably heard of this company. Recursion and other companies like it are these platform companies. They've got some technology that they can use to try to discover many different kinds of drugs. And there were years when those were quite popular. Interest rates were low. A bunch of these companies got started. And then money became more expensive with the biotech sort of like crash in like 2021, 2022. And then platform companies became kind of a dirty word. And so as we started it and iterated, we really stepped on the gas towards going straight into more assets, therapeutic programs, directions, getting mouse data as fast as possible. Because we kind of saw the writing on the wall that if you were only going to try to do platform technologies, you were probably going to have a hard time. So we're doing that right now.
Chiao-hi?
Actually, something we were just talking about. We closed our round of funding and we submitted to the FDA, and FDA came back saying, this looks really good, but we'd really like more data. And so we're in process of getting more data now, because this is the only time that you can gather clinical data for flu and COVID and RSV. And so we're in process of doing that. And you know, my background is in engineering, and I have a lot of experience in operations. And so raising capital has been new, and that's, for me, so far been the biggest challenge, and understanding how that works, how, you know, what investors are looking for, how they want to see it presented. That kind of thing has been a stretch for me at this point.
So maybe a natural follow-on question, what I'm hearing from all three of you is that the challenges all come from unexpected things happening and you needing to adapt to those unexpected circumstances. So my question is there a way that you can build that capability into your organization in advance of it happening? Or how do you build an organization that has that ability to quickly adapt to new circumstances? And whoever wants to answer, please go ahead. Nobody wants to answer.
I can start. I was going to say, you know, as someone who's been an operator, one thing you do is you put in contingency plans and mitigation plans. And so I see everything through that lens, even like with my kids, right? What are the contingency plans if they forget their soccer cleats or whatever? And so that's just the way I see everything. And then just, you know, Myles, what you were saying is expect the ups and expect the downs, and the downs aren't necessarily bad. It's just something you need to plan for and know that they're coming. And so that when they do happen, it's not as much of a panic that it's happened. It's you fall right to the contingency and mitigation plans that you've already thought about before.
Yeah, I think that's right. Another thing that we try to do is get in like really ahead of what these changes might be, and we spend a huge amount of time just talking to people about just about everything. So, talk to folks in the market, talk to public folks, talk to folks at the FDA, talk to other startups, reach out and just bug other founders. And I mean, kind of the phrase that we use around the shop is there's an old, probably apocryphal story of Sir Francis Galton going to a market where there was a cow or a bull that was being weighed. And there's a contest, say, everyone in the audience try to guess the weight of the bull. And if you take the average, that's actually probably the bull's weight. You know, this is kind of how markets work. And so around Leash, we're like, every day, what's the cow weigh? Let's go talk to some more people, try and figure it out. So.
Yeah, I don't even know if there's more I'd add to that. I mean, you try to have contingency plans, and I'd say if you're lucky, your contingency plans work, right? Because it's hard to truly predict what's going to go wrong, or we wouldn't have the issue of needing to adapt, right? So to what Ian said, I think communication has been really important for us, both with employees internally in the company, but with partners, with customers. And we always talk about in our company, transparency is the most important thing. And we've found that being transparent with customers about where we're at, transparent with partners, investors, has made it so that when issues show up, people aren't surprised, if that makes sense. It's not oh, we thought you were perfectly buttoned up, or we thought your product was, 100%, developed. And they're just more confident in our team's ability to react and respond rather than, thinking we were already fully put together, if that makes sense. So.
Great, thank you. So I think this is true, but I'm not 100% sure. Are all three of you first-time entrepreneurs?
Yes.
Okay, so tell us all here, what's been the most surprising thing that's happened to you as an entrepreneur compared to whatever it is you were doing before that?
I can start. I would say so I'm a very technical person. When I started Leash, we built the lab in the basement of my house. I moved a genome sequencer down there. I did all the experiments with my own hands, wrote the code. I knew this was coming, but I have been surprised at the speed at which that has receded from my life. So I have like an 11-person team, and they're all amazing. They're amazing in every way. And all the stuff that they're doing is just receding in the distance, and I can no longer really keep my hands on the technical aspects. And that like peeled away so fast. I am stunned at how fast it peeled away. So,
Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say the most exciting or surprising thing that happened to me was that I became an entrepreneur. Like just flat out. Like my wife always, when I married my wife, she like gave me 2 rules. She said, "You're not allowed to start a company," and she said, "You're not allowed to. If you did, you're not allowed to have any family work with you."
So she was expecting you to break rule number
and
one.
I broke both of them like immediately. So, and that has been the most surprising thing to me. Like I love science, I love research, I love med school. Thought for sure I was going to be a physician, and during all that stuff, found that like I could have a big impact by pushing forward a company rather than that stuff. So that's been kind of my journey a little bit. People ask me, are you an entrepreneur by heart? Would you do it again? And I'm like, I don't know, but it's been a exciting journey to grow. So,
Like Chad, I never thought I would be a founder. I always thought I would be an individual contributor in a very large company where they give you stock grants as bonuses. And this came up, and my husband basically said to me, "When we're old and gray, you will be super sad that you didn't take this opportunity, and that will be the one regret you have if you don't do this now." And so I did, and it's been great. And there are days I do look at myself and say, "Oh my gosh, what have I done?" And from what I understand, that is part of the founder journey. I think everybody says that to themselves. But one thing I've felt that is surprising to me, and again, coming from large organizations and leading fairly large organizations, I've been surprised at how lonely it is, because there are some issues and problems that really only I can fix or I can make a decision on, and I don't know if you guys have felt the same way, but it's been, because everyone has a different lens of the issue, and so it's felt at times strangely lonely, and that's what's been very surprising to me.
So I alone can fix it is a thing then. So following on that question, what advice do you have for the entrepreneurs in the audience here as to things they should think about, things they should do differently, things they should consider before they jump in with 2 feet?
So, I mean, most of the people I've met in our space are hyper-focused on funding. So maybe I'll speak to that one, and you guys can speak to whatever you want. But from a funding scenario, it's funny because in all the, kind of talks that are given before, everyone's like, "Hey, we're happy to take a cold call." I have never gotten a response on a cold call. So I like
Same.
Cold email and cold calling is so.
Have you tried pretending to be a prince from Nigeria?
Oh,
That sometimes
I
works.
haven't.
Does that work? I will
Yeah.
try that.
Yeah. So the hardest thing for me when I started was everyone always told me you need to get out and network and just build relationships. And at the beginning, I was kind of like, that is not my personality. I don't like getting out and just networking with people. It would have been easier if people told me like, you're not going to be able to raise money if you don't network with people. Because then I would have had a little different perspective on just like building relationships now. And for the raise we do in 4, 5, 6 years, I've now learned like, oh, it's based off the relationships I build today. So building relationships is very important, and networking is very important. But yeah, that's the feedback I have, is just you got to get real comfortable talking to people. So.
And really steady at it.
Yeah.
Like you got to go out, like if you've got your list of folks who you want to keep it going with, you got to reach out like every quarter and just keep it going forever. And a lot of them are great people, so you should do it. And maybe one thing I would say, if you go to kind of like entrepreneur boot camps or like tech ones like Y Combinator or whatever, they'll spend a lot of time talking to folks about iterating to get the sort of like product market fit. And in some aspects of life sciences, there are products that you can generate quickly and get into patients' or consumers' hands, like what y'all are doing. And there's other ones that take like a lot longer, but that doesn't mean you can slouch on like the strategy of the thing that you're trying to build. And it's really useful to talk to other people trying to do similar things and like what is actually working, what has flopped. Have there been companies in similar space that are suddenly quiet? You know, like really trying to take the pulse of what's happening in the landscape is something I think is useful to be doing all the time.
One thing I would advise on is look beyond the horizon. And so, yes, you have the technology that you're working on right now and that you know it's going to be good, but then the next thing is regulatory, right? So as you're working on that, have the regulatory lens in line. And beyond that, have your commercialization and possibly, you know, how you're going to get to market in line as you're doing these steps directly in front of you, so that it goes to your contingency and mitigation plans, right? You're working on these things now immediately, and you know, okay, this thing is coming up, and if something happens here, you can quickly pivot, or you've thought about pivoting, such that I'm an individual. I hate surprises. My husband surprised me with a birthday party once, and it was like the worst thing ever. And so I don't like surprises. I like thinking. I like planning. I like planning ahead, and having multiple pivots at any moment is something that makes me feel more comfortable. And I would recommend that for anyone, really, especially if you're heading into entrepreneurship, and because it's a wild and rocky ride.
So I think it's a truism that no one is an island, and I guess no company is an island. Could you talk a little bit about how you select and leverage outside resources outside your own companies to achieve success? And any specific examples you might have of that?
I'm happy to, yeah. So I have several advisors on my team. One is, used to be a senior executive at Walmart. He's been incredibly helpful with helping us navigate how to get into the big box retailers. And so I guess I am constantly looking for people who have expertise outside of my tiny, tiny little bubble of knowledge. And again, the more I found other people with other expertise, like that's how I've grown as an individual, but as a founder. And that's everything. Between Walmart, we have an epidemiologist on our advisory team. There's all sorts of groups of people that I rely heavily on.
Yeah, us too. We've got our own set of advisors between regulatory science, CMC, manufacturing, like all this stuff, and also a bunch of founders too, and also the investors. It's probably good, if uncomfortable, to just reach out to people as you see them and chase them down. And even at events like this, that's something that I've done a lot of, to try to talk to folks and try to get their advice if you can.
And what I'd add to that, I think it's important to understand where you're at in your stage of growth and being willing to get the new set of resources depending on where you're at. Our seed round, so we did our seed round in 2022. From there to today, the resources I use are very different. Our seed round guys were phenomenal. They knew legal structure. They knew all the basics to help me along. Today, they have no idea what to do. They're like, I am just 2 thumbs up on the meeting and keep going. And so it required us to always, you guys mentioned on it, to make sure you're always talking with the people that can get you to your next phase. I've seen other companies that started at the same time as me, and their mentor, they were so stuck on the mentor that they had a hard time growing to the next phase. And so being able to understand what you need at the moment, but also prepare for the mentor you need at the next phase, I think has been really valuable to us. So.
Before we started here, Chiao-hi and I were talking, and I mentioned to her that 25 years ago when I got in the startup business, one of my mentors at the time said to me that I should be prepared because in this business, 90% of the time, the news is going to be bad. So I imagine that your experiences are, maybe the percentages are hopefully different than that, but when you have those difficult times, those dark times as a startup an entrepreneur or a CEO, especially if you have a team, how do you manage your way through that? What are the strategies you use to turn that around?
So I'll say we've been kind of blessed to say that we haven't had the bad news that a lot of people have had in terms of like FDA approvals getting denied or really detrimental things. But obviously we still get a lot of no's. We still, have a lot of contracts that we thought for sure was going to be a home run hitter, and it came back and they said no. And you just got to get really good at not having that bother you. And I do think it's a mentality. I'm spacing the name of who presented earlier, but he said as an entrepreneur, he said you have to really enjoy the lows and the highs. And I think that's why all of us started a company, is because we saw the effort it was going to take, and we were confident we were going to be able to pull it off. So yeah, I don't know that there's a silver bullet, but we just always tell our team, it's like, as a leader, anytime someone gets a no, I think the way you respond impacts your team a lot. And so every time we get a no, it's just, you act like it didn't even happen. It's just like, move forward. And the team's like, oh, okay, yeah, we're fine. So
I think that's true. I would also say that we are very lucky to have a team that is so really believers in the thing that we're building and what kind of future that thing might enable. And we kick the tires of that thing harder than everybody else. And so whenever we get these kinds of no's, it's like, okay, well, probably Ian did a bad job of explaining it because it's so clearly working and it's so very deeply good. And so I think I'm really grateful that we have this really sturdy edifice, and that kind of gets everybody through some of the bumpier times.
I think for me, when things happen that, I wasn't expecting, I go back to a thing I saw where, as an entrepreneur, you're taking no's, you're taking L's, things are not going the way they're going, things are taking much longer than you're expecting to. And at the end of the day, you're still living your best life. This is the job you chose for yourself, and this is the path that you chose for yourself. And so when we do hit lows, I just remind myself, I chose this. This is the ride I chose to be on. And there will be highs, there will be lows, and just anticipate them and expect them, and they're not so bad after you switch your mentality.
So maybe to move from the dark to the light then, tell us a little bit about what's been most fulfilling about becoming an entrepreneur and a startup CEO from the transition you made from your previous life.
For me, just because my product is so soon to be coming to market, it's been really satisfying to have people light up and say, oh my gosh, I would totally use that. That would have been so helpful for me, last week. And so we're really excited to do that. We have a lineup of different things coming through our company as well that we're really excited about, things that will honestly be life-changing for some people. And so we're just excited to be able to bring these things and make life better here.
Yeah, I would say it's very gratifying to have an idea and to make a bet on something that has been rattling around, at least in my head, for about a decade. And I kept waiting as the years went by for someone else to do it, and they kept not doing it. And then I was, in disgust, kind of did it myself. and that it's working about kind of like how I figured it was going to go is it's enormously satisfying.
I love science. I love our product. But we just had like our recent round of, it was like our first round of an annual interview. Most of our employees joined within like the last 18 months. And it was by far the most gratifying thing to hear everybody say like, this is the best job I've ever had in my life. Like, I love working here. And it wasn't something I was expecting, but everyone was like, if I can stay here my whole career, I would. And that was a very gratifying feeling, because I found it was just like, okay, people love their job. They love what we're doing together. They love working together. So for me, by far, it's surprisingly been that side. I mean, I started it because of the product, but right now, it's by far the people I get to work with, and being very motivated to make sure they enjoy getting to be a part of it. So,
Thanks, that's great. We have about 15 minutes left in this session, so before I keep asking questions, because I will keep doing that, let me find out if there's any burning questions in the audience here, folks that would like to bring up any topics that this panel can provide advice or insight on.
As a CEO, you guys might have worn many hats. Like you might have been a salesman, scientist, finance profession. You might have acted like that. But what was the role that you guys underestimated the most while coming into the role? And how did you work on it? And how did it change your leadership style?
Who wants to take that one?
I mean, Ian and I were talking about this before, and he mentioned it already. It was like, most of us in this space start off as scientists, right? We're going to be scientific founders, and that's what drove us to make the leap. And you lose that a little bit because you got to be willing to manage. I think for me, the most surprising thing, and this is going to sound bad, but I can't think of another word, but babysitting is kind of the word that's coming to mind. And it really was just like managing relationships and reminding people like what we're doing, and just constantly reminding people like we have this one goal, or like course correcting a lot. I found to be a big part of my job. And it's been a surprising one, but I think it's absolutely crucial that you as the founder constantly remind people what your vision is, because I think you just assume people know. And I learned quickly, like most people don't truly know like what you're building. They know pieces. And so reminding people what we're building is, I have found to be something that I wasn't expecting to do so much, but was really important.
I would say that our team is pretty aligned, which I feel very lucky about, and I don't have to do quite as much of that. When I started, I kind of made the assumption to myself, like, well, okay, I don't super want to do this part of the job, but it's probably 50% of my job is going to be sales moving forward. And like, that is completely incorrect. It's like 90%. So someone told me that's like, oh no, really? 90? Like, yeah, man. So that was my surprise.
I will say I went in wide-eyed as to what I definitely knew I was not good at, and that was accounting and finance. And so I quickly found a fractional to help us with that. But what's surprising is you go in knowing you're going to have to wear a lot of hats. What I didn't realize was how in depth you had to go in with all those hats. Like you in sales, you're 90%, right? And you thought you were going to be a lot less than that. And I that's been a surprise for me. You have to know every single aspect of it well enough in order to hand it off if you're at the point where you can hand it off.
Other questions?
First, thank you all for being here. This has been really helpful to me. Can you speak to your transition from your day jobs to being CEOs? To me, that's a really big leap, and I'd love to hear how each of you did it.
I can speak real quick. I'm a younger founder, so that was something that was very stressful to me. I didn't just want to get the CEO title just because I co-founded the company. So I actually wasn't placed as the CEO for almost a year or a little more in our company's trajectory. And even today, I feel like I need to earn it pretty heavily. And so I feel like I'm still in that transition, and that's why we have mentors and all that things. But being willing to admit that just because CEO is in your name does not mean you actually know how to be a CEO. I've found that being very, like, having that mentality has helped me be a much better manager of the business, because I'm more willing to collaborate, more willing to admit that I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm willing to learn it, and I'll grow over time into the CEO I want to be.
Fortunately, we have venture capitalists to tell us how to be CEOs. Anybody else want to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. I will just say that when I transitioned from my regular day job, I mentioned earlier that we started the whole thing in my basement. And so basically I set aside about 6 months of living and knew that was how it was going to go, and figured in those 6 months we would figure out if this is going to have legs or not.
I think to Ian's point, there's a very practical delineation, right, of the salary that you're taking versus becoming CEO and possibly not taking a salary. Ian was smart, and he set aside 6 months. If there is any way that, you know, and you see this a lot more in software, but people can work on it in their off time from work. If there's any way you can do that for what you're working on, I would 100% recommend that, because once you step off and you need to raise capital as well as doing the thing that you're doing to make, you know, the thing that your company is doing, it becomes very stressful, because frankly, those are 2 full-time jobs, and you're doing them both. And so if there's any way you can hold off on raising capital or do something where you know, you set aside funds, you have a spouse that can support the family, you know, that's something I think that is really important to take into consideration.
Marry rich. Did you have a question?
Thank you. So insightful conversation. I heard you mentioned, Chiao-hi, for example, like that you chose the path. Do you feel like there is opportunity to, the option to pivot? Or do you think you're founder now and you have to stay there? That's one question. And the other one is, do you think it's hard to commit if you're keeping the 9 to 5 while you're trying to build a company?
That's a very good question. I can't comment to the commit part, because when I did it, I fully committed. I tendered my resignation, and I said, this is my last day, and this is, you know, when I'm going to start Solution Diagnostics. I will say it's to your first question of pivoting. I have seen many founders pivot, and so that is always absolutely an option. I think it just depends on the founder. Personally, for me, you know, our first rounds were from family and friends, and I don't feel like I can pivot as easily as other people, because I'd like to see these people in my life. So I'm at a point where, you know, we're really close to making it work, so I don't have to stress too much about that anymore. But I think it's different for every founder. But absolutely, if there's I think the skills you gain as a founder, you can absolutely pivot and be value added to another organization.
Anyone else want to comment on that? Not necessary if you don't. Other questions?
Yeah, this has been fantastic. It's like a CEO group therapy. Appreciate it a lot.
That's what I was going for.
As a fellow founder. So I have a question for you then. In startup, as you go through the different phases, there's a lot of uncertainty and ambiguity, and sometimes fear related to the results and all the people that are counting on you, whether it's the investors or the employees and their families. How do you personally manage that? I'm just curious, because everyone has different ways of, you know, coping with the entrepreneur life, if you will. And then how do you walk your team through the uncertainty and ambiguity that come in these cycles in a startup? And we're in a new phase of uncertainty and ambiguity in this market and even this week in the news. But curious your thoughts on that.
You mean other than drugs and alcohol, I assume? Yes. Go ahead. Okay.
I would say that being here as compared to, say, the Bay Area, there's enough dilution of entrepreneurs out in the world. I know folks who, you know, have started companies in the Bay, and everyone in their peer group is a CEO, and that's all they talk about, and it completely infuses their minds and their lives. And being able to like walk in the foothills is so great here to just like forget all that stuff. And then kind of to your second question, what has been useful for me and my team is we've seen multiple people, including me, at the company go through these cycles where it's like things are going really great, and then they're not. And people have their different cadences. A friend of mine who is like a startup financing lawyer put it this way. He's like, well, you raise and your life is great. And then after 6 months, you realize the promises that you made of what you're going to do with that money and the obligation to deliver on them, and you get really freaked out. And then when you're down to like only a few months of money left, you have dropped your bombs and you start to feel a little bit better about it again. And so you see people go through these cycles, and what I found really useful is the next person who goes through one, you go to the last person who went through that. You're like, see, they're going through it, right? And then everyone knows that this is like a very regular occurrence, and it maybe shouldn't influence your decisions as much as to just acknowledge, like, yes, these are big feelings I'm having, and we're going to get through it because they did last time and I did the time before that.
Yeah, I would say along those lines, like I like to say, like, I speak like an optimist, but I operate like a pessimist. Like, and that goes back to the transparency side and being overly transparent with the people I'm working with. I found when everybody else feels the same pressures I do, it helps a lot. The times where I felt the most stress is when I'm like, yeah, everything's fine, the company's great, and all of our employees are like, sweet, and I'm like, we better get funding or we're like toast. And I found that, like, when I'm open with people and they're just like, where are things at, and I can be transparent, like, it helps a lot to see your employees like trust you, be with you on the ride. And so that's one side. And the other side I'll say is I had to get comfortable that the pressure was good. Like, without the pressure, you're not going to push yourself. And that's another thing is the pressure's good, but your whole team should feel the pressure. And I've found that, like, letting everyone know about the bad stuff actually helped the whole team feel pressure rather than just me. And it helped a lot. The stuff didn't change. The problem didn't change, but it felt like the team was accomplishing it rather than just me. So, yeah, 100%.
Other questions?
I mean, I'd love to build on that, actually, because I think it's challenging as a startup CEO sometimes to think, you know, am I in a parenting mode here and I need to, like, shield and protect people from ambiguity? Or am I going to do what you've just described and, you know, share everything that's going on? And I think going through that experience and kind of trying both, I guess, you know, we lost some people from our team that couldn't deal with that ambiguity. But ultimately, they landed in an environment and in a company that was much better suited to them and the kind of risk and ambiguity that they could cope with. So I think thank you for sharing that. That was, yeah, really, really insightful.
Well, I don't see any questions in the audience at the moment, so let me ask. Is there one? Oh, sorry, didn't see the...
You don't have to walk all the way back here. I'll just
You've got a loud voice. You're good.
Yeah. From the diaphragm. You can just make it really quick, because I know, you probably want to get out of here. You can just, like, do a one-word answer, but sometimes, depending on the role that you take on in your life, it gets harder and harder to parse out who you are from what you do. And what you guys have chosen, what you all have all chosen is something that is very much seems like a part of your identity. Is that something, do you ever struggle with trying to parse out who you are from what you do, or is that something you just embrace? You just say, this is me and it's all part of the same thing, and you can say parse it or embrace, or however you want to answer it.
I would say embrace. I'm proud of it, but I like to bring my home life to work a little bit so that people at work don't think it's like, oh, he just loves science and nothing else. I'm like, no, I love BYU basketball like you couldn't believe. So anyways, I like to bring it to me, but I love to embrace it as part of who I am.
I'm pretty good at parsing, I would say. I think like all stuff is temporary. Good times are temporary, bad times are temporary. This will be temporary. My body is temporary. And so I think I'm okay with that.
For me, it just depends on the day. Some days I completely embrace it. Other days, I've found myself I've had to parse and be able to not think about things for a couple hours.
Well, we've got like 2 minutes left here, and one question I hear all the time from entrepreneurs who have never done it before is, I have no idea where to start. Where do I start with fundraising, with putting a company together, like, what's your advice to that person? What do they do first?
Start with what you're good at. When I started, I was a scientist, so I just started with getting a research paper out the door and getting data out the door because that's what I was good at. And then the other stuff started building on it. So start with what you're good at, and the other stuff, you'll see the gaps and you'll fill them.
Yeah, and talk to people who have done it before.
Exactly those two things.
Okay, anything else from the audience? Well, if not, I think we're just about out of time here.